So, first of all, thanks to the organizer for this opportunity. Today, I would like to give you an overview of a project that I've developed during my PhD thesis, and which is about modeling active oscillations. And we'll see how we can test this kind of modeling with a classical biological system, such as the spontaneous oscillations of the Bullfrog cell band. So, as the name says, active oscillations characterize systems which oscillate in time, and this type of dynamics is fueled by energy consumption and production of entropy. There are several examples which arise in nature at all scales, going from circadian rhythm in bacteria, but also animals, heart beatings, modulation of the singing of the birds. And also there are these two nice recent examples which regard, for example, the sitting and standing dynamics of cows, and also the cell crowding in a wet environment. In particular, we are interested in providing a coarse-grained dynamics description for these systems, which usually are very complicated. And we know that whenever you end up coarse-graining that microscopic dynamic, and you access only a subset of all the possible mesostates, you end up with a description which is no longer Markovian, even though the original one was Markovian. And in particular, for example, in the case of oscillating system, one can characterize oscillating system between two states. One can characterize the state of a system by looking at the statistics of the dwelling time in each of the two states. Of course, this coarse-graining and the presence of non-Markovianity induces a typical time scale, which is associated, of course, with the period of oscillations, and which makes the waiting time distribution non-exponential, basically, which is the Markovian case. So the biological model that we will use to test our theory consists of the spontaneous oscillations of the Bullfrog hair bundle. So the hair bundle, as you can see here on the bottom of the slide, is an apparatus which is able to transduce incoming mechanical stimuli into electrical signals, which are of course elaborated by by the brain of the bullfrog as a sound. So this hair bundle protrudes from the apical surface of the ear cells, which, as you can see here on the left, create an epithelium, which is inside the sacculus of the inner ear of the hair bundle. What we are interested in particular, is not like the mechanical induced oscillation of the hair bundle, but their spontaneous oscillations. Indeed, this also happens in basically most of the animals. If you are in a very quiet environment and you put a microphone in your ear, you might register some sounds which are evoked spontaneously from your hair bundles. And you can check this in a lab by taking single cells of these ear cells post-mortem from the bullfrog, and still even after death in a physiological solution, you can find this kind of oscillations. So this is one of the most understood and studied system in the biology of eukaryotic cells. And there is already a nice description, very beautiful description, which regards the evolution of this hair bundle, which relies on coupled stochastic linear differential equations. So what we want to do is try to give a simple description at a coarse-grained level, and see if we still get some good agreement with the data. So if you don't know anything about the hair bundle, I suggest you to start from this very nice talk by Professor Jim Asper. So this is just a suggestion. So the model that we study is just a generalization of Orsen-Uhlenbeck process. That is the overdamped dynamics of a Brownian particle in the presence of an harmonic oscillator. In our case, we choose the minimum of the harmonic oscillator to be itself a stochastic process. In particular, we choose the process to take two values. So this process, as you can see from the picture, it alternates between two values. And the waiting time in each of the two states is expressed via this distribution, which is called waiting time distribution, and in general could be any. This induces, of course, a switching of the harmonic potential between these two, for example, these two parabolas. And in general, this system is linear and also non-Markovian, because this waiting time distribution in principle could be any. This is a trajectory of a typical trajectory of the model, which consists of the alternate relaxation towards the two minima of the potential. So as I was mentioning before, we are interested in waiting time distribution, which display a typical time scale that is a maximum. And for this reason, we choose with gamma waiting time. So in the case of gamma distribution, we have two parameters. One is theta, which tells you how fast the distribution decay. And there is another parameter k, which keeps track of this power law and tells you how much your system will be non-Markovian. So in the case of k equal 1, you get the usual exponential distribution, in which case the oscillations of the system are not regular. And this can be seen by looking also at the power spectral density, which, as you can see here from the picture, doesn't show any typical frequency. So this is a comparison between analytical results and numerics. So in general, for k larger than 1, this distribution display a peak, which coincides with a new time scale in the system, which of course induces a more regular oscillations in the dynamics, and also a well-defined peak in the power spectral density of the process. So we use our model to fit the data of let's say recordings of the oscillations of the tip of the air bundles. We start with our friend Alfred, and we consider three different bullfrogs of the same species. So here we compare, first of all, the statistics of the trajectory, 1-point statistics. We get a good agreement between the distribution of the stationary distribution of the position of the tip, and also of the waiting time distribution. And then also we use this to infer, let's say, to infer the power spectrum and its Laplace transform, which is the correlation function. Some of these quantities, from almost these quantities, we have analytical results. And finally, we do the same with other two bullfrogs, that is Manfred and Ludwig. And once again, we find a good agreement for the statistics and also for the power spectrum and the autocorrelation function. So we conclude by giving some estimate.
You have 2 more minutes, Gennaro.
Yes, it's fine. We conclude now giving some prediction on the thermodynamics for this type of process. And we know that we can characterize, for example, some thermodynamic property by looking at work. And in particular, we look at how the energy of the system changes by varying the external parameter, which in our case is the minimum of the potential. You can see here, you have contribution to the work only at correspondence of a switch, because you see the variation of the work is proportional to the variation of the process C itself. And you can only have contribution to the work only when you have a switch. In general, for this model, we can calculate the first and second moment of the work. In particular, we are interested in the first moment. And we see that, of course, at large times, the first moment of the work scales linearly in time because of large derivation principle. We can extract from here the coefficient, which as you can see, is just expressed as a function of the Laplace transform of the waiting times distribution and also of the typical average period of the system. And with this formula, we can estimate the average energy needed to fuel a cycle of oscillation for the three Bullfrog that I've shown before. And we find that basically we have an order of 10 ATP consumption per cycle, which is somehow in agreement with other findings with our other works. So I would just like to conclude now, and I'll show you. We found we introduced a minimal model for active linear oscillations, which is still non-Markovian, but it can be solved up to some level, of course. And then we find a good agreement with the typical oscillation of Bullfrog, and we have characterized its thermodynamic properties. And finally, I would just like to mention that on this model, we have also used this model to study the effect of memory on learning algorithm, and this allows us. This model is nice because it allows to easily tune the non-Markovianity of the system. So that's it. Thank you for the attention.